Cheers. Hey everyone, the name is Kris Barocsi. Welcome to comment time number 17. This is my Q&A series, so if you want to end up in one of these videos, just leave a comment below, ask whatever you want to ask, or just share whatever is on your mind. Let's start with a comment from Kris. This came under my One Guitar to Rule Them All, the Telecaster video, which was about Telecasters. Yay! I have never heard of anyone think of a Tele as a kind of a Strat, which is something I said in the video at the beginning, like don't think of Teles as kind of Strats because they are so different and they would disappoint you if you think that. The amount of misinformation out there is crazy, especially not only beginners, but also players who just play different styles of guitars. I work in a music store, and you cannot imagine how many times I've heard conversation like this between two players, like visitors, standing in front of the guitar wall and looking up. It's like, those are, what are those, Teles or what? And the other is like, yeah, those are Teles. It's like Strats, but with less pickups. And I'm like, no. It's, wow, let's talk about it for a sec. Yeah, it's how it is, but luckily, lots of experienced players know exactly that it's a very different story and will play Teles differently than Strats, which is the right thing to do, well, for the most part. But I kind of felt like this sentence and this whole segment at the beginning of that video was absolutely necessary for those who are not really familiar with these guitars and the fine differences between Strats and Teles. One of my latest videos where it was a 2-video series basically, where I compared capacitors on the tone pot, and one was a paper and oil, the other one was an orange drop, way more affordable, and I compared them, and man, the comment section is, oh wow, that's quite some arguments and discussions going on, and it's fine. That's not an easy subject, and I was expecting that. Christian wrote this comment under the Guitar Myth Busting Are Paper in Oil Capacitors Better video. Living dangerously, as always. I like it. Not agreeing or disagreeing, though the heart of the matter is in whether both caps had the same exact reading. Well, that's been clarified in the second video. I'll put the videos, by the way, links to the videos in the description box and in that corner too, in case you missed them. But a question comes to mind. If PJD built a €3,000 guitar, gorgeous by the way, yes it is, sparing no expense and even using bare knuckle pots, why would they not use paper caps if they thought they were actually better? Sure not for the €12 difference. Great question. I love it. And yeah, let's talk about it. But first, let me grab the guitar. Here it is. This is the guitar I was using. It's a PJD Guitars. This is the brand. And it's a St John model, a limited model, which means mahogany back and maple top, roasted maple neck and rosewood board. Mind-blowing guitar. And yes, it's not very cheap. The question why the guys didn't use the most exclusive vintage correct paper and oil capacitor, it's because it's not necessary. I think I even mentioned this in the video. I didn't feel like the paper and oil is like, oh, that's the holy grail. Now I've found it and I can throw away this crappy old orange drop. No, actually there was a difference, and the orange drop sounded a little treblier, more modern, and the paper and oil had just, for some reason, I don't know if it was because of the construction, the type of capacitor, or just these two capacitors sounded slightly different, but the paper and oil sounded a little warmer, sort of vintagier. Yeah. I love both capacitors in the guitar. It's not like the paper and oil should have been better. Why didn't they use it? It's because it's not necessary. That's the point. With the orange drop, the guitar sounded so great that from day one when I unboxed the guitar, I just couldn't stop playing it. The pickguard is starting to look really well played in, and the rest of the guitar too, but because it's matte, you don't really see it. It will start to shine probably under my arm soon because of all the hours of playing it. But the guitar sounds as good with the orange drop as with the paper and all capacitor I used in that comparison video. It's slight differences we're talking about, and it's not necessarily better and worse. It's just slightly different. If this was my brand and I had to make all those decisions, which parts to use, I would do the exact same thing. I would go for the orange drops as well, because everyone knows the orange drops. You will find them in really expensive guitars all over the planet, and they just do not sound any worse than all those exclusive caps. They just sound maybe slightly different. All right, let's stick to Teles for a second. This came under comment time 14, and it's from Marco Simonic. Hey Kris, love listening to your comment time videos. Cheers, man. Thank you. I have a question about my low to middle budget guitar, Fender Modern Player Telecaster Plus. I've had this guitar for 10 years, and I love it to pieces. Love the neck, body contour, the versatility, HSS configuration pickups, playability, how it looks, etc. And it has great sentimental value to me. It was my first good electric guitar. Now I am fortunate enough to be able to afford some better guitars, and I have actually, but my Tele is the last one I would sell. The only thing is that I can hear and feel that the pickups, pods, and the rest of the electronics could be better. What is your suggestion? Leave it all in original condition. It is not a bad guitar by any means, or tweak it. How much better can I get with some quality stuff? Will there be a significant difference, or will it be just slightly better? In this case, I would prefer to leave as it is. Thanks a lot for the question, Marco. It's really hard to tell how much better a guitar will be, especially if you don't know the guitar. Like, I never had your guitar in my hands. I never heard it, never plugged it in, never compared it to something more, I don't know, expensive or whatever. You never really know. That's the beauty and the downside of modding guitars. You just never know how much better it will be. With time and experience, of course, you have better chances of guessing if that specific guitar is worth investing money and time and just modding it and everything or not. It's nearly impossible to tell, but I kind of feel like Mexico guitars, Mexico Fenders are really, really good to begin with. And especially if you really like it and nothing is faulty, like nothing is really bugging you, I think you can just leave it as it is and appreciate the guitar as it is. If, I don't know, the pot is just weird and you can definitely hear that it doesn't do whatever you want from it, well, then it's definitely worth swapping it. Or if, let's say, the pickups are, I don't know, too muddy or too harsh or too quiet, that's something that you can fix for sure and find pickups or pods that will fit your taste much better. So in that case, you will most probably, again, you will probably hear a bigger difference, which makes all the trouble worth. But unless that's the case, just leave it and enjoy it as it is. And now it's time to dig deep in effect switchers, like pedal switchers and effects loops and all that. So, and also it's time to butcher a name. I have no idea where you're from, so let's start with the safe butchering. Adrien Besson, Besson. But maybe you're French in that case. Adrien Besson? Maybe not, sorry. Hey, great video. I have one question. I'm using an orange amp with an effects loop in order to separate overdrive pedal and modulation pedals and delays, reverbs, flangers, etc. I'm really considering getting a pedal switcher like yours, but how do I have to set it up with the effects loop? And how do you even connect a noise gate which already has a send return? I'm really confused about the whole connection. I'm not surprised to hear that. It is confusing. So let's start with a simple example, okay? You have an amp with an effects loop. You have one overdrive you want to put in front of it, and you have like a delay or reverb you want to put in the effects loop of that amp. And you want to switch all that with a switcher. You go with your guitar into the input of that switcher. Then in the first loop, you will have a send and return, which is the output and input. You will connect that overdrive pedal you want to have in front of the amp. Okay, so send from loop 1 goes into the pedal, and from the pedal you come back in return. That's in loop 1. Loop 2 is going to be your amp. That's where you have to connect the amp with the switcher with the 4-cable method, which is, let's try to not mess this one up. Which means that from loop 2, send, you go into the amp's input. Then from the amp's effects loop, send, you go into the loop 2, the switcher loop 2's return. And then from the switcher's output, you go into the amp's effects loop return. This is the 4-cable method with which you actually looped in the preamp of your orange. Okay? More about that in a sec. And then in loop 3, it's again simple. You just loop in that delay pedal you want to use in the effects loop. So loop 3, send goes into the delay pedal, and from the delay pedal with another patch cable, you come back to the loop 3 return. And then you're good. One thing is very important. If you do this, you should never turn off loop 2, because with that, you disengage the amp's preamp, which is looped into it, right? So if you do that, if you turn loop 2 on the switcher off, then all you have left is your pedals, if you want to use them, and the power amp of your amp, which will radically change the tone. It will only be clean, of course. It might get super loud depending on the design of the amp, where the effects loop sits, or super quiet, or just sound weird. Don't turn loop 2 off if you have the amp connected to it with the 4-cable method. That's how it works. And as you see, every single switcher, doesn't matter how simple it is or complex, can do this. You just have to choose the loop where you want to loop in the amp. Everything in front of that loop is going to be in front of the amp, and everything behind that loop is going to be in the effects loop of the amp. And now let's talk about the noise gate. If you want to, let's ignore switchers for a sec. If you want to connect a noise gate with send and return, you have to connect it with the 4-cable method. Again, the same connections have to be made, this 4-cable method, as what I explained a minute earlier with the switcher. Okay, so it's the same thing. With that, you can take care of the noise coming from the amp's distortion. That's the most sophisticated and safest way of using a noise gate. But to be honest, I've been playing lots of high gain amps and high gain tones, and I had noise, so I was using noise gates a lot earlier. And for the most part, it worked perfectly fine simply in the effects loop, like no 4-cable method and nothing. I just connected the noise gate to the amp's effects loop right before my delay and reverb pedals, and it worked fine. So that simplifies stuff, especially if you want to use a switcher as well, and you don't want to go crazy with what goes where and how to connect that and all that. So if you want to keep it simple and the noise gate you have works in the amp's effects loop with a simple connection, well then that's my recommendation. If it doesn't work, Adrien, just I don't know, let me know in the comments. I'll get back to you. Next one is really interesting. It's from Arturo LR. Hi Kris, great video. I have a question. I hope you can give some advice or an opinion about it. Do you feel sometimes that an expensive guitar is not as good as you expect? I mean, I had always liked Fender guitars and actually started with a Squire, but over the years, I was upgrading my guitars with some made in Mexico, Indonesian and Japanese Fender guitars, primarily Teles and Strats. And finally, some years ago, I saved up for a couple of American standard Tele and Stratocaster from the same range. But a week ago, I decided to buy an American Professional 2 Stratocaster. And I don't know, man, this time I don't feel a difference or an increase on quality. Actually, it looks great, but the play feel is, in my opinion, a downgrade and closest to a Player Mexico Strat. So I decided to test it using an oscilloscope, looking for huge differences in sound range and wave range, and surprisingly, they are really close to be the same. So do you think that maybe the idea of the quality should be a little overrated for American Fenders, or do you think that maybe I got a quality exception on my American Professional 2 Strat? First of all, if you already owned an American standard Tele and Strat, the Professional series is the American standard range. They just renamed it because they felt like they need to refresh something and they want to offer some different features and different finish options, different neck profiles, or rolled off like fretboard edge and everything. Also new pickups, and like they tweaked the model, the American standard model, to a point where they felt like, whatever, let's call it the American Professional. And now they arrived to the second generation of that. But all of those little tweaks aside, these are the American standards. So I'm not really surprised that you don't feel a big difference between the American standard Strat you have and the Professional 2. If you prefer the old specs, you will like that guitar more than the Professional. So there's that. And another important thing to talk about is how the Mexican-made Fender guitars developed and became pretty much as good as the American-made models over the years. I remember all these 90s Mexican Fender guitars with the super edgy, like fretboard edge and like all those little things that felt cheaper than like an American counterpart. This is gone. If you start A/B comparing an American model and a Mexican model, in some cases the pickups will be like way more defined or prettier sounding. The pods will have a, I don't know, different feel on the American one, but for the most part they are very, very close. You will have obvious differences, like for example, you will not get rosewood boards on Mexican models anymore. If you want that, you have to choose one of the American models. Long story short, in my experience, if we're talking about American-made Strats and Teles, you have less of a fluctuation than if we're talking about Mexican-made ones, which makes a lot of sense because you pay more money for them, which doesn't mean that there are no Mexican-made ones which are pretty much identical playing and sound-wise as like American-made ones. It's just so that it's a safer bet getting an American one. That's what I mean. Thank you so much for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these videos I'm making. And of course, see you next week in a new one and meet you down there in the comment section. I'll be back. Bye-bye.